Hi, my name is Joseph Lusay. I'm a senior product manager at Intuit, and I have been working on advanced reporting for the past couple of years. So I lead the team that builds and improves advanced reporting.
Great, Joseph. Thank you very much for joining me on this video. First of all, can you give us a quick Reader's Digest version of the limitations that are in the standard QuickBooks reporting, whether you have QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Accountant, or Enterprise? What are the limitations that QuickBooks currently has in terms of reporting, and the reason why advanced reporting was created and what it solves for?
Inside of QuickBooks today, there's already a lot of reporting functionality that you have at your fingertips, but the more customized and complex your business becomes, the more difficult it is for you to pull out reports that are going to match your specific needs.
Okay.
So to get into a couple of tangible examples of where reporting inside of QuickBooks has some limitations, there's a lot of capabilities in being able to customize reports, but some of the things that often will nag people is when you're trying to get in there and customize a report and change, what some of those columns might be, do some filters and choose different data, and add things like maybe your custom fields that you've used to really customize your business, and you want to see a sales report based on these different custom fields. You want to be able to subtotal and group things. You want to be able to create calculations that are unique to your business. If you're calculating the job profitability a little bit different than how QuickBooks might be doing it, removing sales tax or something like that, or doing sales commissions. So there's a lot of those different cases where you, as a small business, have a specific way that you want to see how things are going, so you can make smart decisions. And in QuickBooks today, it's difficult to be able to get down to that level of granularity. So advanced reporting really comes in, and it structures the data in a way that's optimized for running any different type of report that you can dream up. Whereas QuickBooks' database is really built to facilitate entering in that information and doing all of the workflows that your business might have handy. So once you get into advanced reporting, think about it as all your data is there at your fingertips. You can combine disparate sets of data that weren't previously connected. So, your quantity on hand for all of your products, and then look at the actual sales history, over the past couple of weeks or months, and you can start to build some trends and make smart decisions about, do I have enough product on hand, or do I need to purchase some of these products to make sure that I'm going to be able to meet the demand for my customers.
Right.
And so it really gives you a limitless capabilities in how you use your QuickBooks data to build the insights that really help you manage your business day to day.
Okay, so let's go through a couple of examples. Go back into QuickBooks reporting, just regular QuickBooks for a second, so I can just provide some context here. You mind clicking on the window menu and clicking on close all, so we can just close everything that's there. So the first thing, this is the way I explain reports in QuickBooks. Let's pull up 4 types of reports. So go to the reports menu, go to custom reports all the way at the bottom, and do a transaction detail, and then we'll hit OK in that. Okay, so that's one type of report that's called a transaction detail report. Okay, we can do all dates on that. Another type of report in QuickBooks is a summary. So if you go to reports, custom reports, summary, and again, you can do all dates on that. And we can do, this could be a profit and loss, this could be a balance sheet. So right now we have 2 types of reports, one that contains a grouping of data summed up into one account or one item or one customer. That's a summary report. And then we have line by line, which is the other report behind it, which is a transaction detail report. So the challenge is that QuickBooks cannot combine components from a summary and a detail report. That's one of the challenges we have now. The other challenge we have, if you don't mind, can you go into reports and go to an list report and go to item list? Okay, you can do item listing. So this is a third type of report. This is a name report or a list report. So the third challenge is certain components that are on the list report cannot be added or combined into a summary report or into a detailed report. So, and then there's a fourth type of report, and Joseph, I'll allow you to give me some input if I miss something. I think there's three, in my view, there's three types of reports: summary, detail, and list or a name. And then the fourth type of report, these are the ready-made reports, which is it could be a plethora of things. We have, AR aging, item summary. These are all the specialty reports that are built in. But from a customization standpoint, I think that we have to think all the reports either as a name report or a list report, summary report, or transaction detail report. Would you think that's a good summary of the current spectrum of how reports work in QuickBooks right now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good summary.
Okay, so one classic example, one request that I have, if you go back into the item listing report, can you scroll towards the right and pull up a preferred vendor, for example? So we have a preferred vendor, which is data that only sits in an item report or in a list report, right? And if we want to see, for example, our total sales by preferred vendor, that won't work because a total sales would be a summary report or a detailed report, and preferred vendor is data that's not carried inside of each transaction. It's only carried on the item list report. So my first question I'll ask you, Joseph, and take your time, whatever time it takes. Can I create a report that gives me sales by preferred vendor, for example? And how would that work?
Absolutely. So if we go into advanced reporting, there are a variety of options for you. You can start by using some of the default reports that we've created and use that as a starting point to customize and make it, meet your specific needs. You can also just get started right from scratch. So we've got this little welcome center that it shows you some of the types of reports that you can build. You can also view the list of all the starter reports that we've got available. You can see I've got a lot of customized reports in here as well, but if I filter to just show the starter reports, these are the ones that we will show you, and you'll get right out of the box. So they're a really good place to start. So we could take an existing sales report that we have here, and we could customize it to see your sales by your preferred vendor. So in your example, I think you were asking me to see a sales summary by preferred vendor. Is that right?
Yeah. So I want to see the total sales pertaining to all the items grouped by that preferred vendor.
Okay. So what I'm going to open up here then is our sales by item detail report. And so this is showing, right now, basically every single sale that I've got, and it's called a pivot table, right? So similar to in Excel, where you've got a hierarchy in your report, right? Things are going to be grouped and sorted and subtotaled based on some of the different dimensions that you've got in here. So in this example, the hierarchy of information is first your item type, then the specific item name, then it'll show you the transaction, and you'll be able to see, each particular line item where each of these items were sold on. And so what you're looking to do is really just start to customize this report to be able to see this information grouped first by preferred vendor, right?
Yes.
So the way that you're able to customize any reports in advanced reporting is simply by right-clicking on any object in here. So we want to right-click on this table. We'll go into the properties menu. And at first this may seem a little bit intimidating, but that's really because we know you need a lot of power to be able to get to all the different nuances and unique reports that you may need to create. So hopefully we've got a lot of resources available so that you can become a little bit familiar with what's available here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add another dimension here.
Just real quick before you jump into dimensions and expressions, which is like the area where most people freak out when it comes to advanced reporting. If you jump into QuickBooks real quick, if you don't mind, the regular QuickBooks reporting, and you open up a summary report that we already had open there, um, and you go to customize report, I think most people are used to the concept of columns and rows, right? So columns and rows, which right now is total by columns total by total only, and rows by income statement. If you actually click on, if you don't mind, if you click total rows by and put item detail, this would be, if you change it from income statement to item detail, the rows. I think that may be a place where most people start, right? That's like in QuickBooks custom reporting, they'll start like this and go, oh man, I need that extra dimension, which is prefer vendor that I cannot pull out of this. So when you go back into advanced reporting, just kind of keep in mind that we're a little bit used to this rows and columns. So when you talk about dimensions and expressions, if you mind translating, how dimensions and expressions in the advanced reporting translate into what we're used to, rows, columns, and filters. So sorry about that. Go ahead and show us how you're going to build that report. Just want to make sure that you're sensitive towards, me. That's how I understand reports anyway.
Yeah. No, that's a great call out. So um, certainly think about your dimensions as being what defines the rows here, right? So anything where you're seeing these headers here, right? So you can see this shows the different types of items, right? You've got your inventory, you've got your inventory part, service, right? And that's what's creating that grouping and that subtotaling. And then even within that, you may have different categories of products, and so that's really where you're defining what the rows are.
So dimensions,
In
dimensions,
advanced reporting.
dimensions are rows. And so I understand also completely. In QuickBooks, you can only have one dimension or one row, where in advanced reporting, you can do sort of sub dimensions, or you're kind of like how pivot tables work, correct?
Yep, you can get basically an unlimited number of dimensions. So you could see your sales by sales rep, by country, by city, by any kind of dimension you would want to think of. So you're really slicing and dicing your data down to very specific categories.
Okay, go ahead and keep going with your example. So just for my notes here, dimensions allow me to give me a multiple row depth. And so dimensions
Right.
are rows, and also with advanced reporting, I can have multiple row depth. So I can go into a row and a sub row per se. So I guess the major dimension that we're going to have, the primary dimension, if I understand this correctly, is going to be somehow preferred vendor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead and do it.
All right. So we're trying to do this one pretty simply. So I'm just going to add preferred vendor. Now, one of the things that you get with a tool like advanced reporting, because it is so powerful, is a lot of options and a lot of data as well. So it's the best source of QuickBooks data that's available. So it pulls out a lot of information here, and it can be a little bit daunting to sort through it. So I'll show you a couple of tricks on how to get to information faster, how to find some things that you're looking for. So when you first are looking at adding something to your report, you can see every single field. So this is a huge list. I think there's 1,240 fields, and it's expanding as we build out the data model even more. So it can be daunting to try to look through this. You can filter that down by selecting a specific table. So there's roughly 140 tables. Some are small, like if we look at the class table, there's just certain characteristics within the class table, certain fields within the class table. Some are pretty long. If you look at the transactions table, for example, this is going to have all information that is on any transaction in QuickBooks, whether it be a purchase transaction or a sales transaction. But this is a very helpful table, because if you want to see what was actually there on that invoice, you're going to want to be referencing the transactions table. And so this is a very, very common table to be using if you're thinking about anything that's showing you data on what you transacted, which is where we're going to pull from right now. We're actually going to look in our transactions table, and we're going to look for our preferred vendor.
Now, is it worth it, Joseph, for you to remove the dimensions that are there now, just so we can build it from scratch? Because I know you got some dimensions already in there on the right side.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. What I wanted to do was first just added to it to show
Sure.
how you can, easily just start with something that we've got and tweak it pretty quickly to get at what you're looking for.
So before you, okay, let's clarify what you did. You went into the item table, which is a list table, which is the example that I said. This is a list report, like the item list report. So you pull the item, you pull the item table, which is all the data in your item listing report, which is right behind that. I think you have it, and that's where you're starting. You're picking a field or a column from the item listing table and using it as your primary row, correct? That's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. If you think about the item table, it's really going to contain any of the information that you can get at here when you're entering in an item, right? So all of this information, even the custom fields that are available, all of this stuff, each of the different options in there. If you've got multiple units of measure, or if you have advanced inventory turned on, it'll have things. Well, there's actually separate tables for serial number and things like that.
Right.
But I went into the item table, like you said, and it kind of more relates to that item listing report. And within there, I was able to find a field for the preferred vendor's full name.
Okay.
So I added that as a dimension because I want that to be the first thing that's defining our rows. So if we go back to our summary report, you want the very highest level, instead of just being the type of item, to be the preferred vendor, and then everything kind of falls under there, so you get to see a summary for each of your different vendors. So that's essentially what I did, is kind of add that as the first and primary dimension that's going to be segmenting this report. So this one was pretty simple. There's no calculations. There's no kind of scripting or feeling like I've got to write in some logic and be an engineer. I'm simply adding a field to the report, just as if you were customizing a QuickBooks report and you're choosing a new column to add. So I was doing that, and I added preferred vendor, and then I can click OK, and now you can see I'm able to have all of my detail here be listed out for each of the vendors and each of the items for those vendors. So I'm able to get that really granular information. Okay. I'm also able to change this, because it's a pivot table, to be very summary as well, if I wanted to. So you can have that flexibility to basically combine the first two examples that you were talking about, both the detail report and the summary report, in one, by being able to have kind of an expand collapse capability like you see here, to go through each of the different levels within the report.
Okay, perfect. So let's go deeper into this one. So right now we have, it looks like we have four dimensions, or 4 row depth. Yep. Let's call it that. We have preferred vendor first, then item type, item, and transaction type. So let's say I don't really want to see item type or item or transaction type, and I don't want to see any of these columns. I just want to know the total amount by preferred vendor. So let's narrow this down. So now we have a couple of things that we're editing, I guess. We have to edit the expressions, which are the columns in here, correct? And we also have to edit the dimensions, right? So we have to get rid of 3 dimensions, get rid of item type, item, and transaction type, and also edit the columns of detailed data, which is the expressions. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I got you. So you want to see a very simple report that shows total amount of sales for each of the vendors.
Correct. No detail, not by invoice, not by customer, none of that stuff. For now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for now.
Yep. So there's multiple ways that you can do that. I'm going to go through, what I think would be the simplest, typically when I'm building a report in advanced reporting, I like to start big and then get down smaller.
Exactly.
So throw a lot of information on the report and then start to narrow in on exactly what you're looking for. So right now, we have a superset of information, right? We've got every single sale of every single item grouped by vendor across all time, right? And we've got a lot of information on each of those sales, but what we really want to do is see that at a more macro level. So we'll go in and make some modifications to this report. So one thing that I'm going to do that's going to make it, kind of a very quick way of doing this is to just make some changes here. And under the presentation tab, I've got the ability to choose whether I want things to be expanded or not. So with each of these different dimensions, if I change them so that they're not always fully expanded, what that's going to do is essentially give me that expand collapse capability. So if I click OK, now I'm able to see one row for each of my vendors, right? So that was a very quick way for me to change this into just a summary report that shows my total sales for each of my different preferred vendors.
And where did this memo come from? That's a little bit confusing. So where did that memo come from? Is that did he just take the top transaction and put that in there, or?
So are you talking about, when we're looking now here at this summary, and some of them have a memo, some of them don't have a memo?
Correct. Yep.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
Sure. So basically, when you have a pivot table like this, and once you start to summarize the information like we did with this expand collapse, what it's doing is it's only going to show you for, if you think about it as non-calculated fields.
Uh-huh.
So whenever, like date, the number, the memo, the name, basically anything except for amount and quantity here. If it only has one value possible, it's going to show that. But if there's multiple values, it's not going to show because they're conflicting. So in this case, for the city of Bayshore, if we look at what we've sold, we've only had, permits be sold, and it's always had the same memo of building permit. So at the summary level, it's able to say, hey, the memo is building permit.
Right.
But if there would be another thing in here, like let's say we bought, blueprints, designs, or something like that, it would not show any value there because there would be conflicting information. So it's just going to hide it from you so that you don't see it at all.
Okay. All right. So go back and show that report again where it just shows, I guess. Okay. So you turned off what was it that you touched over there on the left side? It's one of the I guess it was a filter, right, on the left side. These are the filters. Okay.
Yeah, very handy to know. So advanced reporting is unlike QuickBooks reporting in that you really should view it as a dashboard and a data discovery tool. So everything that you click on helps you further filter down and dive into your data. So when I had clicked on City of Bayshore, what it did was it filtered this whole report to say only show me things that match having the item preferred vendor name as City of Bayshore. So it really is a very quick way for me to start to dive into my information. That's unlike QuickBooks, where in most cases in QuickBooks, when you're viewing a report and you double click on something, you are able to quick zoom into either that item or that transaction. Advanced reporting is a data discovery tool, so it really is more of a navigation tactic for you to start to filter your information. It becomes much more meaningful and powerful when you think about using advanced reporting to build a dashboard where you have multiple reports and visualizations all on the screen, so that you can make selections like, hey, I'll choose a sales rep, my sales dashboard, and I have multiple tables and bar charts and graphs that now are immediately all updated to just reflect the sales from that one sales rep. So that's what's meant here by this current selections. It's always very handy to have on there, and at any time you can remove a current selection by just clicking on the little eraser, so that you get back to seeing the full report.
Okay, perfect. So digging deeper into this report, let's say I don't want to see a date, number, memo, quantity, sales price. I just want to see amount, but I also want to see the customer's name, and I want to see the customer name expanded. So in other words, I want my first row or my first dimension to be preferred vendor, my second dimension to be my customer name, and my data or my field with summarized data just the dollar amount. So how would you do that?
Yep. So again, you're going to right-click right in any of these objects. Again, since advanced reporting is kind of a dashboard, any of them can be customized by simply right-clicking on them. You go to properties, and now we're going to start to play with our dimensions, right? So these are the columns, if you will, right, to relate back to
expressions.
QuickBooks.
You mean expressions, right? Expressions.
That's not, yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, expressions.
It's
So
confusing to all
within
of
the
us.
expressions here, I know it's very careful to be clear on the terminology here, especially since it's all new, right?
Right.
All right, so now I've got a list of basically what all the columns are, and those are my expressions. And so we don't want to see the date, the number, the memo, right? We really just want to see this customer name. But the way you just described it kind of changes the nature of where we would show the customer name. And ultimately, we're really just looking at the amount, right? We only want to see the total sales amount.
Correct.
So what I'm going to do is I could, delete these simply by clicking on delete. But again, as I like to, just kind of keep this and whittle it down, there's another way to simply hide that, and that's by unchecking this enable button. So once I do that, it shows me that it's no longer using this information. So I can take all of these different fields and uncheck enable, and all of a sudden you'll notice that once I actually apply this,
great,
it's
awesome.
now giving me a very streamlined, simple report, right?
Yep.
And if I hit OK, that just also is another way of applying it, but removes that preferences from me. So now I've got that simple report, but you wanted to add a layer of customer within there, right?
Right. Yep.
So again, we're going to right-click, we're going to go into properties, and the reason why I don't keep customer over here in the expressions is because if it was just a column, we're not going to be grouping and subtotaling the information. You can recall that when we had it as a column, if I enable it here and hit apply, well, not for dates, I want to
name.
If I enable this and I click apply, you'll notice that no value shows in there, and that's because there's conflicting values. For this vendor, there's multiple customers that had a sale made to them with an item that was from that preferred vendor.
Sure.
So if I want to actually be able to see it, grouped in subtotal, I'm going to want to add it as a dimension.
I guess
think about it as a row now.
Two ways, Joseph. I guess you can enable it just to kind of think about if I'm understanding the follow through. Go ahead and enable it, and then under presentation, if you go to presentation, what if you allow name to be fully expanded? What would that do? I guess. I mean, I'm just kind of following through the logic that you use. So what happens if name gets fully expanded in this case?
Well, it's still not going to show us anything. What it's going to do is it's going to basically go up the chain of command here, right, up all the different dimensions and say, all right, we always need to be showing the name, and so it's going to expose all the other dimensions in between here and there. So it gives you a lot more information that you probably don't want to see, and since it's entered in there as an expression or a column, it doesn't really it's not contributing to the hierarchy of the report, right? So that's why you're not getting that grouping in the way that you want to.
Got it.
So that's why we wanted to change it from an expression to a dimension.
That makes sense. Thank you. That makes sense. Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that. I'm going to go back to our expressions or our columns, and I'm going to make sure that it's disabled. Click apply. We're back to this very simple report, and now we're going to dimension on there that's actually going to show the customer name. One thing I'm going to do to clean up a formatting thing is that you notice this is really ugly, right? It shows the full database name. Small are really going to want to see that. They're going to want to see preferred vendor. So I can add a label to that, and you can certainly change all the fonts and colors and anything like that. So you can go pretty deep into the customizing of the formatting, which we probably won't get into today. I just wanted to show you a couple things so that it doesn't have to look so ugly. So we're going to go ahead and add another to add the customer name. So I'm going to go into our transactions table.
Okay, Joseph. So you're telling me you're going to get rid of the name as part of the expression, and you're going to now add the customer name as a part of the dimension. That's going to be the second layer after preferred item, correct? Preferred vendor, correct?
Yep, that's right. So whenever you're trying to build a report that kind of subtotals and groups things, that means hierarchy, that means pivot table, and that means those things that are, you're sorting and grouping by, you're going to throw them in there as a dimension. Typically, I mean, anytime you hear that word by, you're dealing with a dimension. So if you want sales by item, you want sales by sales rep, sales by country, you're dealing with some dimensions. And so in this case, we wanted to see sales by preferred vendor by customer, right? That's what we're looking at.
Right.
And so we're going to add that customer name as a dimension in here. So I'm showing you one way of doing it by going to, kind of whittling down your list, going to the transactions table, which is still quite large because there's a lot of information in there. We can find the customer name, which is right here under customer full name, and I can add that. Now it puts it at the bottom of the list. By default, we're going to want to promote it so that it's right there underneath the vendor name. Again, to go to the quick formatting, we don't want to see that ugly long database name. So we're just going to add in customer, and then we can hit OK. And now it doesn't show up by default because we had said, hey, we don't want this to be expanded all the way. We just want this to be tucked nice and neat. But if we right-click on any column header, you can hit Expand All, and it's going to show you each of the different customers now for that preferred vendor, and it's now summarizing the sales for each of them. So you can now see that. Now, since we did customer full name, and since this is a construction company that's using jobs, you're going to notice that each customer has each of the different jobs in there. Simply a different field. If we wanted to say, I want to see everything for Christie Abercrombie, it would just be choosing not a full name, but the parent name, so you have everything nice and neat and tidy.
Oh, show me that.
But here you
Show me
go.
that. That sounds interesting. Show me that. So instead of showing the customer and job, we're going to show just the customer.
Yep. So in that case, I'm going to go to our customer table. Now this is basically all the detail about your customer. So if you went into QuickBooks in the Customer Center and you look at Christie Abercrombie, all the information that gets entered into this screen that's connected to Christie Abercrombie, that's all the information that shows up here in your customer table. And what we're looking for here is a field called customer parent full name. And what that's going to do is it's going to track back through this hierarchy that you see in your customer list. And as you know, you can have multiple levels of jobs, and it's going to roll it all the way back up to the top customer, which in this case will be Christie Abercrombie. So we're going to choose that field, and we're going to add that one. That's going to be what we use instead of this transaction customer full name. Now, just like where we could hide things in the expressions, you can also hide things right here by enabling conditional enter 0. I know that's a little bit more technical. You can delete it as well, so we'll just simply remove it to make it simple. But here we've got our customer name, add customer. Now I click apply, and you can see that no longer do we have all of that, what could be considered clutter if you do, you don't want your jobs to be cluttering things. And now I see it just kind of total up by that parent customer. So all jobs for Christie Abercrombie get grouped into one row, and I'm showing the total sales by preferred vendor, by customer, and there's your just clean amount right there.
Yeah, I find something curious. On the first filter, on the first time that we added as a dimension, we picked up the customer full name from the transactions table. But now we're picking this up from the customer table. So how does it know to pull up sales data, not expense data per se? Is it because of the other dimensions that are under it?
Yeah, that's correct. If we look at the expressions in here, we know that we're dealing with just sales information in here. So that's how it knows. So there are other things that were built into the starter report to make sure that you're going to just be looking at sales data there.
Okay, so the key is to get started with a starter report and not remove dimensions and stuff like that, because you may just lose the essence of the data that's being entered. Now, can I ask you a different question? Where, like, okay, so in the concept of QuickBooks reports, we deal with filters. Where is this? Where exactly are we telling this that this is only sales information and not, profit information, for example? Why is it just sales and not sales minus cost of goods sold, for example?
Yep. So there's multiple ways that you can do that. The very basic filters, where you're just kind of choosing certain fields that you want to show, can be accomplished, in something like a list box, which is kind of what you're looking at over here, right? So here's a list box of all of our different customers, where I can just choose, multiple and say I only want to see these particular customers. So it's only going to show any results that match these customers. So that's one way of doing some filtering. And you can add, any different type of filter that you want to be able to see a certain set of data. So if I go into the library, we've got some default filters for you. For example, I will choose sales reps, and you can see it adds another box for me to make a selection. If I want to just choose my name and say show only things that relate to Joseph Lassay, I can see that really quickly. So that's a way of doing filters in a very clickable way, as opposed to kind of a programmatic way. But if you know that you always want to see a report filtered a certain way, like in your example you were talking about total sales versus profit, things like that, you're going to get a little bit more into the detail of the report. You're going to build it in to the dimensions and the expressions to make sure that your report is always only showing the set of information that you care about.
Okay.
And so that happens, back in this properties menu here, where you see some of this stuff that gets a little bit more complicated on, defining specifically the information that you want to see.
Okay. Let's just keep building upon this report. I have some requests for some colleagues. I put in a posting saying, hey, what would you like to see in advanced reporting? One person is saying they want to see sales by ship to address, but they want to specify a specific part of the ship to address, which is the country. So in essence, I think we would have to replace the initial dimension from preferred vendor to, I guess, from the customer list table, pull up ship to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you can actually do it from the transactions table.
Right.
So you want to make sure that because as you know, you can add a customer onto a transaction, and then you can change their ship to address on the invoice. And so if you want to make sure that you're getting, exactly what was on the transaction, you're going to go to the transactions table to make sure that you're getting that information. So you'll notice that there's this ship to address. You've got all the different fields for them, because QuickBooks is a product that's been around for a very long time, and we've made a lot of changes to the database over the years. There are a lot of fields to choose for the addresses, but most of these you'll figure out are really tied back to a specific way of entering a customer. You've given me a nice and easy example here of doing the country. I don't think we're going to really be returning any great results, as this isn't an international company, but I will add two to show you kind of an illustrative way of doing this. So I'm going to add country first, and then I'm going to do city, because I think everything in the Rock Castle construction is from California, and then there might be 3 or 4 made-up cities. So I'm going to move those all the way up to the top.
Perfect. And we're going to get rid of the preferred vendor.
That's right. We can get rid of our preferred vendor, remove that, and then we're going to give this a name so it's nice and simple for us.
Yep.
And city. And then I'll show you what it looks like when you just click apply. Actually, no countries were entered here, so that's why you don't see anything. Like I said, I don't think we had any countries, but now I've got all of my cities, and I expand and I can see within each city who are each of the customers, and then who are, what the total sales were for them.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty neat. And now thinking about, for example, auditing these items, we can we can. So the first one, the first city. So let's get rid of country for a second, if you don't mind. And so we'll get rid of the country dimension. So the first city dimension you have comes from the transaction. So if I want to see if, for example, in a particular sale, the default city name that's on the customer table was changed in the transaction, I guess I could put both dimensions and compare them next to each other. Would that does that make sense? So
Yeah, I'm
right,
trying to think about. I would add it as a. What I would do in that case is add it as an expression, right? If you want to do it for auditing purposes, and the reason why you do that is when you're building up this hierarchy of dimensions or the rows that you've got there, it's naturally kind of filtering things, right? So it's saying, it's got to match this Bayshore and then match this, right? And so it's not going to be possible for um, for it to necessarily match in the dimensions category, right? So let's take an example of, let's say we got Christy Abercrombie, right? And her ship to address in QuickBooks, the default one, right, on her customer record, might actually be, let's say it's Beverly Hills, right? But on a transaction, it was changed to be Bayshore. What's going to happen in that case is, so you got Bayshore, and then you'd have your customer, Christy Abercrombie, and then if you added the field for the ship to city for Christy Abercrombie that comes off of the customer record, you could certainly see that, and what you would see is another level here of where you'd be bucketing based on the two different ones, or if there were three different ones, but I think the transaction would have only one, and then if we did transaction city and then we did customer record city, then you would only see one here because this transaction record matched it, and then you'd have to scroll down and see based on this one, you'd have another record for Christy Abercrombie. It was kind of a long-winded way of saying, I think your best way for audit purposes would be to add it as an expression so that you can see it there. Actually, I changed my mind. So you're going to need to edit this whole part out. You're right. Dimension would be the right way to do it. And what I would do is I would start with the. Yeah, I think you hit it right. I would actually add it, right here as the next dimension and say the customer record city.
okay.
No, the customer record city is always going to be just one, right? So you would want your highest level to be the city, the ship to city from the customer record, and then you would want the.
I guess we could do the customer as a second dimension, or maybe the invoice number as the second dimension, right? Because all we're trying to do is find out if the default ship to city
was changed.
was somehow changed in a transaction. Now, not that that means a whole lot, but it could mean something if that's what you're trying to achieve, I guess.
Yeah, you're right, and it really it depends. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to solve, and you could do it either way because, as you know, in QuickBooks you can have multiple ship to addresses for a customer. So really, it depends on what hierarchy of information you want to look at. You could do it either way, but yes, you would be able to add it as another dimension side by side. Just make sure your label is, shows you which table it's coming from, and you'd be able to see, is somebody changing the ship to information on invoices for auditing purposes, as an example. Yep.
Okay, so let me throw another wrench at you. I want to pull a report that shows me as my first dimension my vendor, just my regular vendor, and my second dimension the expense account or cost of goods sold account. So in a nutshell, I want to see if a vendor was used for if you use the same vendor for more than one expense account. I just want to see if there's consistency or inconsistency on the expense accounts being used on expenses by vendor.
Okay, so we would probably want to start from scratch there.
Yep.
I'm going to save this one here just in case we want to come back to it again.
Yep.
So we're going to say sales by city by customer.
And I'm sure, Joseph, you must get the strangest, most fascinating requests for specific types of reports with specific information. So it must be a whole lot of fun to try to figure this out I mean, I'm not sure how, the position you have, you're an advocate for the product, but you're not really tech support, right? So it's not like you can help every single person out there build a report, but I know that I've contacted you directly for some reports and you've been able to build them for me out of courtesy. So it must be interesting, seeing the types of stuff that people want to see.
Oh God, yes. So you can see, this is just within, probably the last year, 152 different reports, and these are all built specifically for customers. You can see I even have, some people's names on there,
Yeah.
or company names and things like that. And you can see how frequently these reports have been added in there. So I am not tech support, but I love knowing our customers and what they want to do. So I build a tremendous amount of reports for customers. That's not scalable. I can't continue to do that. I'm trying to get off that drug, that addiction of mine, and stop doing too much of it. But you're right. I've seen a lot of crazy, insane reports, and I think, as is typical with a lot of things that you come across as an accountant, as an advisor for your clients, a lot of what you're going to run into is really just trying to understand how they're entering data into QuickBooks, because everybody enters it in so differently, sometimes in a way that just drives you crazy. And that's certainly going to, rear its head up in advanced reporting, because the data that you pull out is only as good as the data that you put in.
Right.
So you're
Especially,
going to want to make sure that people are recording information
right.
it doesn't necessarily have to be the right way as far as advanced reporting is concerned. It certainly does from an accounting perspective, for your job. But when it comes to reporting, the key is for your clients to be entering data consistently,
Right.
to use an actual field, not to hack things like adding prefixes to customer names and weird things like that. That's where it's going to make it more challenging. It's certainly still doable, but it's more challenging than if you use dedicated fields and consistently enter information.
Right. Right. So for that expense report, we're gonna start with a starter report, and I guess, oh, you're gonna start from scratch. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so we don't have I don't think there's an expense report that's really nice and neat for you in here. I guess there would be like a job estimate versus actual that's got some kind of, or job profitability, right? That's going to have some kind of cost associated with it. Your P&L will have stuff on there as well. But really, we've got a lot more that's on like the sales, the job, the inventory, because those are a lot of the reports that we have worked with customers and seen. Those are the ones that they want to customize to meet their business needs. Expenses, I think, is certainly a good one. I think, over time we could add one to that, because I think it makes a lot of sense. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from scratch, build this up, and quickly we'll get to something that's going to solve your problem. So you're looking for expense by vendor, by account, right?
Okay, so we're gonna do expense category. No, vendor first. That would be the first dimension, or vendor. Second,
Yep.
and the second would be the expense account. The second dimension would be the expense account, or any account in the profit and loss. Really, it could be expense or cost of goods sold. And the third one is amount, because I guess you do have to have some sort of financial data in there somehow, right?
That's right. So what we did is we went to new report. By default, it opens this library. So these are, just default objects that you can add, so you don't have to create everything from scratch. There's a few charts and tables. List boxes that I mentioned are filters. Utilities that we already talked a little bit about, current selection. Very important to have that on there so that you know what selections you've made and you're able to go back and, if you accidentally click on something.
Right.
But then we're going to right click. We're going to go to new sheet object. There's a ton of different objects that you can use, but basically anything that you would consider a report is called a chart. So we're going to do a chart object, and we're going to choose a pivot table. So even tables are called chart objects. So we're going to go through there, and this takes you through a little bit of a wizard, but we're really only going to try to whip through this. So we're only going to set our dimensions and expressions and then get out of here. The first thing that we want is you wanted to see the vendor name, right? So
Right.
we'll go down to our vendor table, and we're going to do, you could choose a variety of different things. So you could do, the company name, and this all, is basically, again, what's in QuickBooks when you go to your vendor center and you're editing a vendor, right? That's all the information that's here.
Exactly.
I'm just going to choose vendor.name.
Perfect.
And I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to go to our accounts table. Now I'm going to do account full name.
Okay.
And what that's going to show us is, if you're looking at your chart of accounts, again, you can have hierarchy there, right? So you can have sub-accounts like under payroll liabilities. That's going to show us that full trail. There's certainly the ability to roll it up and just say the parent name, just like we did in customers. But I'm going to give us this full detail here. And then that's it. Those are our only two dimensions. We can click next here, and this is going to ask us for expressions. Now, this is the first time we've seen this window, but it's another way of kind of getting at that data. You still have your drop downs if you want it. So you can choose account and then account.balance to see what's actually the balance in that account.
Well, so would that show for P&L? So the balance, so just don't get confused because I'm an accountant. The word balance and profit and loss account are not really compatible because balance is a balance sheet concept. So we're talking about expenses. That concept of balance, does it still work?
You're right. That's a good call. So the balance is going to show you, strictly like if you're looking at the chart of accounts, it's going to show you this balance.
Oh, correct.
Which is not what we wanted to see, right? We want to see the transaction-related activity, right?
Sure.
The sum total of that transaction-related activity. So we are going to go to the transactions table, and we're going to use a simple expression. So just a sum function, just like you're in Excel and you're adding sum. You can access functions here too if you don't want to type them. So under aggregation, you could find sum, and you are able to paste that in there, but I had already typed it. So under our fields, we want the sum of the amount with sign. Now, if you just used amount, it's a little bit of a tricky thing, but amount is going to show you always a positive figure. So amount with sign is going to show you positives and negatives and take that into account. So if you've got expenses or incomes related to it, it's going to properly calculate those.
Okay.
There's a couple of fields like that. Quantity and amount are two that come to mind where they have a with sign capability so that you're able to see the total amount or always in positive, or if you wanted to see it with the positives and negatives being taken into consideration. But that was it. It's simple. We're doing just a sum function on one field, and I was able to do it here. Since I'm familiar with advanced reporting, I'd probably type it because it'll go faster for me.
Sure. But so the expression is really like the filter. Is what data I'm going to see, correct? I mean, that's if I'm understanding now expressions a little bit better, it seems.
Yeah, but you can certainly do this type of like calculation or logic even on your dimensions as well. So it becomes really, really powerful, right? And the power makes it complex and confusing and intimidating at times. Yes. So I think when you start simple with something like this, it helps you, kind of realize the potential, and then you can get deeper and deeper, and certainly build those types of, as you said, filters into your report all over the place to make sure that you're looking at something that meets the very specific needs of this particular small business.
Okay.
So this is it. This is all we're going to do. We're going to click finish, and then we'll be able to see, we've got our vendors, and then we've got all of our account names associated with them.
Right.
And then we've got the amounts.
Okay.
So you're able to see everything there.
So
you can
for example,
format the stuff and all that good stuff if you wanted to, but now you're able to see basically all the accounts associated that have transactions associated with these vendors.
But I need to get rid of all the accounts that have to do with the balance sheet. So I would have to somehow figure out how to get rid of accounts payable, checking, inventory, asset. So would that work with a list box and an income accounts, right? I guess that could work. Or a P&L account.
Sure. So you could do the filter, right? This is the easy kind of cheap way. So if you're not an engineer, which I am not, right? And if you just want to see certain types of accounts. So if you were saying you just want to see expense accounts, right?
Correct. Yeah, we don't need to see income accounts because it has to do with vendors.
Oh, to
Ah,
select all, right? So now I'm selecting all the expense accounts, and that's all that I'm seeing here is expense accounts associated with each of these vendors. And you'll notice since I added income accounts, there's some visual cues here. Things will turn gray when your current selections have no overlap with them. There's no possible associations between any of these expense accounts and these income accounts, right? So none of the values shown here, none of the amounts are touching your income accounts at all. Things are green when they're a current selection, and then things will show up as white if there's a possible connection, but you haven't made a selection. So, for example, if I add my vendors on here, you can see that there's white ones because some of these vendors are showing information, are associated with the information on here. Some of the vendors aren't, and those show up as gray because there's no possible interaction there. So that was one way of doing it right, is by simply using a list box and making the selections. But I could also, if I don't want to do that every time, or if I don't want to even have that clutter on my report, I can build it in, just like we built that simple, expression. I can build it into the account full name by also doing, kind of a simple if statement. So I do if account type, right? I would basically be building a simple if statement that says, if it's an expense account, then show the account name. If not, don't show it at all. And then it's going to filter out all of the other accounts to only show me those expense accounts. So there's a lot of power that you can build in to your dimensions and your expressions in their definition to make sure that your report is showing just what you care about.
awesome, Joseph. Okay, so we don't have any more time. Thank you very much for dedicating this time for this. I mean, you definitely gave me a good starting point. Can you tell me where can I find more resources? So where else can I go download and print? I don't know, stuff about this. I mean, it seems like I need a lot more than 1 hour to learn this thing.
Yes, for sure. You definitely do. There's our help site, which I just kind of linked through from within our product.
Okay.
So if you haven't checked that out, that's a good place. It's something that we're constantly adding to. So there's a user guide that you can download there. It's a PDF. It's got a lot of information. Even gets into some of the details about how to write some expressions and what they mean and that type of stuff. So it does get into some meaty detail, not just the basic. There's starter reports here that you can download, and you can also download the instructions on how they were built so that you can kind of walk through it as like a self-led exercise and building your own custom reports. We have a resources page, which has a lot of great resources by our partner Click, because they're really the tool behind advanced reporting, and that's where our team will often go. So we're kind of showing you cultivated resources that our team uses to be very, very helpful. A couple FAQs, we're looking at building out even more of these. So this is just kind of what's out there on our help site. And these are the best resources that are available. So I'd recommend that you head there and check back as we push new updates to it. This will be your best place to go to learn more about advanced reporting.
Okay, awesome. And are there any limitations right now that you would like to, I guess, warn us about? Look, advanced reporting doesn't do this. This is a common request. Don't try to do this. It won't work. Is there any particular limitations, specific data points that we can't access, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there'd be two that I would want to call out. One, at this time, advanced reporting will only work on one company file at a time, so there's no consolidation of multiple companies. So that's an important thing to note. You're working on one company file at a time. You certainly can export data from here, once you get it into a set that you want and start to do stuff there. But within advanced reporting itself, just one company file at a time. And then the second limitation that I want to call out is none of the budgeting information that's available in QuickBooks. If any of your clients are using budgeting, none of that information is pulled.
Okay.
It's data that hasn't been schematized. So when you enter this information in here, it just kind of sits in a blob in our database. We don't have access to it.
Okay.
It's something we could do in the future, but you're not going to be able to run any reports based on these budgets that you've entered here. So that's the only other thing that I can think of at this time as an important limitation.
Okay, and you have to have QuickBooks Enterprise, of course, and you have to have an active full service plan 2014 and above or 2015 and above, which is a
Well,
version.
technically it would work with 2014 version like I think it's R8 and
Okay,
above.
okay.
But there are improvements that you will get by getting onto version 15, and
Or
that's
16.
important to know. There's a lot more functionality. I think you'd be on Advanced Reporting version 1.4 if you were on version 14, and it goes up to version 2.2 on version 15 and 16 of Enterprise. And yes, you have to have an active subscription. It can be the old full service plan model or any of the new subscription tiers. It doesn't matter which one, as long as you've got an active subscription, you have access to advanced reporting.
Okay, perfect. Joseph, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for the time, Hector.
Thanks a lot, Joseph. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.